Yeah, we'll get started up now.
Okay, great.
Hey, everybody, this is Ian O'Byrne. I am the Multi-Literacies Department Editor for the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy. These are a series of interviews that we've put together, basically developed four questions for experts in the field to figure out what they think about these issues. This interview is an honor and a privilege to be able to talk to Cable Green from Creative Commons. Been looking forward to this for a long time. Cable, you want to introduce yourself? Tell us what Creative Commons does and what you do there.
You bet. Well, first, thanks for the invitation. It's a real honor to be asked. My name is Cable Green. I'm the Director of Global Learning at Creative Commons. In a nutshell, I lead all of our education efforts, although I spend a good bit of my time working on policy as well, and I'll explain what that's about in a bit. Creative Commons is a nonprofit global organization, and what we do is we provide the legal and the technical tools which let copyright holders around the world keep their copyright and share their works with the world under the terms and conditions that they choose. So we work with scientists, educators, governments, people who do academic research, who work on data, basically anything that's digital that can be copyrighted. When people want to share, we make it legal and easy for them to do so. So we're in the business of reducing friction of sharing.
That's very cool. I am so excited for this. So we talk about digital content, and the column was all about teaching and learning in the open. Just to start us off, how do you define open, and why is it so important for teaching and learning?
You bet. So when you talk about open's one of these words that kind of like green or diet when you go to the grocery store. That can mean a lot of different things. And so you hear people in the education context talking about open, that you hear open access, and usually that means free access to educational research. You hear open admissions. That can mean a traditional open university, like the open universities from the United Kingdom, or it can mean something like a MOOC, where it's open admission and everybody can come in. Sometimes you talk about open governance. That can mean that everybody in a community or an education institution can participate in the governance of the organization in some way, shape, or form. We'll probably talk a fair bit about open educational resources today. That can include everything from textbooks to open courseware to all the individual components of courses, the video, the text, the assessments that we use. You hear a lot about open data. There's a international movement of governments to share public data on everything from crime rates to education, graduation rates, you name it. The idea that the data can be shared easily. In education, we talk about open pedagogy, which I'll talk about more later, I'm sure. But open pedagogy is this idea that the typical syllabus need not quite be so rigid in a digital world where students can be co-creators of knowledge on the fly and publicly with digital technologies. Of course, open source software is oftentimes a part of the conversation. Open policies come into play. So open policies in a nutshell are that publicly funded resources should be openly licensed resources. Certainly licensing, that's the role that Creative Commons plays as a foundational element of all this, as we provide the open licenses that the world uses to share. And then there's some really interesting work happening now in things like open hardware. So for example, it's very expensive to buy a tractor. Say if you're a farmer in Uganda, you probably never are going to be able to afford a John Deere tractor. But there are open hardware plans out there where you can cobble together a tractor from the old, 55 Chevy that's behind the barn. So I think, most generally, probably your question's mostly about OER, or open educational resources. And with educational resources, when we say open, we mean something very specific, and it's important for us to be specific about it. And that is, open is not just free. Open is free access plus the legal rights to do what we call the 5 R's. And so these 5 R's come from David Wiley, longtime leader in the OER movement. And the 5 R's are the legal rights to reuse, revise, remix, redistribute, and retain. So reuse is Ian shares his textbook with me. I can use it just as it is. Revise is I'm going to take that and modify it, change it to meet my needs. Remix, I'm going to take Ian's textbook and that open textbook from, say, the OpenStax project at Rice University and remix it into something new, a new textbook that I'm putting together to redistribute. I can share that forward with the world on my website or on my blog. And then retain, I get to keep a copy of it. We'll talk about why these things are so important. Probably the best, most used definition out there for OER is the Hewlett Foundation definition, where they say OER are teaching, learning, and research resources that reside in the public domain or have been released under an intellectual property license that permits their free use and repurposing by others. So it's got this idea of free plus the legal rights to tweak it, modify it, change it to meet your local needs.
I think it's and that's the fascinating part is we talk about open, and we have to qualify and say it's really open educational resources. It's using these in the classroom and then hopefully creating and then sharing them out. A lot of times when I work in classrooms or I work with other colleagues in higher ed, we talk about creating content and sharing it online. And we talk about blogging or sharing rough copies of research online or written materials. And so there's always an issue or concern about who owns the ideas, and then where do you go with these ideas. What are your thoughts about ownership, and what are your thoughts about intellectual property online?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. The very idea that what we deal with in education in terms of the ideas, the content we generate, the research we generate, the textbooks we use, that should be owned is a very interesting idea. It comes out of the concept of property law. So if you think about your home or your land that your home is on or your car, these are all elements of property that you have, and nobody else can use that property or even come on your property without your express permission. And I'm not sure that's the best way to think about educational resources, frankly. But let me answer your question. So there's both a legal answer to the question, and then there's an education answer, I would argue. So the education answer that I like best comes from David Wiley, the same guy that iterates on the 5 R's. And what David likes to say is education is about sharing, and that if you're not sharing, you're not educating. And what he's getting at, if you think about what happens, say, in a K-12 classroom, the teacher doesn't stand up in front of the room and say, everybody take a good guess at, what's in my mind or what I have over here in my box of goodies that I'm not willing to share with you. That would be silly, and we would fire that teacher immediately. The best teachers, when we're going to school as young kids, are the teachers that share the most completely. They share their knowledge. They share, interesting connections they have with other smart people. They take kids on field trips. It's all about sharing, right? It's about when we get into college, the best educational opportunities are typically those when you are invited into a mentorship program or an internship where someone else is willing to share their expertise with you. And certainly the best faculty that we have in community colleges and universities are those that share everything they've got. They share all the knowledge they have, and they admit where they don't have it, and they bring in other expertise. But it's about sharing. And frankly, if you're a student, I don't care what grade level it is, if you don't have access to smart people, good content, then it's very difficult to learn. It's very difficult to be successful in an education setting. And so I think the education answer about should we lock things up? Should we own property? Should we protect it? Put it behind closed walls where nobody can get at it? I think that's the wrong approach. It doesn't meet our goals that we have for education, which I think we'll deal with a bit later in another question. Then there's the legal answer, and of course the legal answer here is that yes, intellectual property that we use in education, the textbooks, the courses, the syllabi, all that stuff's copyrighted. And the way copyright works in most countries, including the United States, is that the moment you produce an educational resource, and not just educational resources, but the moment you produce a piece of music or a piece of text or a video, even a YouTube video that you're just slapping up of your kid's birthday party, all that stuff is copyrighted automatically. And if anybody else wants to get access to use that work, they need your express permission. And more often than not, they need a license to use it. So in the United States, we have something called fair use rights. In other countries, they call them fair dealing rights. This is the right of all of us as U.S. citizens to use copyrighted works without permission under some circumstances. But it's a fairly narrow band of fair use rights. The way to really think about and understand open licensing and Creative Commons, which are really the open licenses that the world uses to share educational resources, is to think about this legal answer. So if I, Cable Green, as I'm teaching my Intro to Psychology class today, I produce a new chapter 1 for my course, that's immediately copyrighted. Depending on what my contract says with my university, I might own it, or the university might own it, or it might be a shared copyright, but there is an answer. Somebody owns that content, and nobody else, including my students, have any rights to perform that content, make copies of that content, keep a copy of that content, modify it without the express permission of the copyright holder. So what Creative Commons licenses do is they allow the copyright holder, maybe it's the faculty member, maybe it's the teacher, maybe it's the university, but it allows the copyright holder to say, look, I'm going to keep my copyright, I'm not going to give up that intellectual property, but I also want to share this with my students, with the state that I live in, all the other universities, with the world. And so I'm going to add an open license, add a Creative Commons license to my copyrighted work, and share under the terms and conditions that I choose. Now, of course, there are other legal tools other than copyright that affect educational resources. Patents and trademarks are the kind of the two other major areas of intellectual property law. Creative Commons licenses only deal with copyrighted works, and frankly, that's mostly what educators deal with is copyrighted works. But at some universities, of course, faculty in the university deals with patents. And patents, of course, things like utility patents or design patents are for inventions or discoveries of new processes or new designs for manufacturing processes or software development processes, etc. Creative Commons licenses are not used for patents, and frankly, most educators are not engaged with patents. But I think that's, just to sum it up, those are kind of the two ways to think about that answer of who owns the ideas. Should people own educational content? Well, should they own it, yes or no, is kind of answered. The answer is that the moment you produce a tangible, fixed expression of a creative work in the United States or any other country, it's automatically protected by copyright law, and that means that somebody owns it. So the answer to the question is yes, people do own it. But then I think the more important answer is this education answer. Education's about sharing, and we live in a world now where what we deal with in education is digital, and digital things can be stored, distributed, and copied for near zero cost. And so I think as educators we ought to ask ourselves, should we leverage those tools? Should we maximize the capabilities that digital education stuff enables us? Should we think about, I'm skipping ahead a bit, I know in your questions, but what kind of world can we imagine given that we've got the internet, educational resources are digital, and we have Creative Commons licensing? And I'll stop there, not to preempt your question.
Well, I mean, it's one of those challenges because I agree with you. I think that there's enormous problems in education. I think and I have a pretty narrow view. I'm living and working in the Northeast United States, and so in terms of haves and have-nots, we're pretty privileged here. I recognize the fact that there's a lot of people globally that don't even have the resources that we have. So I share everything. I agree that part of education is sharing. I share everything I possibly can. I've been asked by colleagues, well, why do you blog about ideas? Why in the world would you create and run a MOOC? Why would you create stuff and give it away? And my thinking is, well, if I create materials for my students here in my class, why not put those up on my blog as well? And I talk to colleagues, junior faculty and senior faculty, and say, blog, share your ideas, reflect on what you're doing, and then try and have people do that in their classrooms as well. And there's always that fear of, you have to own that. You're not going to get a publication. You're not going to get tenure, and and who knows what will happen for me. Maybe I don't get tenure because I blog. But so you talked a little bit about this. How do we, what's the best way? What are best practices? How do we, in an informed way, protect work that we put online? You said it's already copyrighted, but then some of us, I do, go the extra step and have that Creative Commons license. How do we protect the work and intellectual property of people, ourselves, our students, online?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we should loop back to some of your astute comments about why people share and reasons for sharing. So maybe we could cue that up as a next question and come back to it. But how do we protect the work that educators and students are producing online? I think it's helpful to, before you answer that or think about answering it, to sort of take a step back and say, what's the goal? What's the what are we doing in education? So my whole career has been in higher education. I didn't get into higher education to get rich or to get wealthy. Frankly, if I wanted to do that, I would have chosen a different career. I got into education because and I'll just speak for myself here, but I think a lot of educators would say something similar, because I believe that education's a good thing. I believe it's good for families. I believe it's good for individuals. I believe it's good for countries and pluralistic thinking and liberal democracies. I believe that education is critical to a more peaceful society and world. I believe that people generally have better lives when they can contribute and do something that makes them happy, and that they've got opportunities to make choices about how they live their lives. And you and I know that an education is a foundational part of all those things. If you're in the United States, and today, there was a time in the U.S. you could graduate with a high school diploma, and you could have a great career working on a farm or at one of the big three automakers, and have a very good middle-class life. Those days are gone. If you have a high school diploma, you are going to be poor, full stop. The only way to even enter the middle class in this country anymore is to, at a minimum, have an associate's degree and likely some other certificates along with that, some kind of stacked credential, and more often than not, you've got a bachelor's degree or more, and and you hopefully have access to a good network and somebody's Rolodex to get job opportunities, because you are competing. We all are competing globally. In this digital networked world that has intercontinental flights that go everywhere, and that's just a fact. And so without an education, you don't get to play or make choices in most of what you do with your life. And I don't mean to offend anybody by that, but I think that's the case. So given that, and pairing that need and want of people to get a higher education with the capabilities that we have before. Educational stuff being digital. When I say stuff, I mean everything we use, the textbooks, the assessments, the video, the syllabi, all this stuff that has been built for over a decade on computers. It's all digital. And it's digital and it's editable if we share those files. Plus, you've got the internet, so we can share all this digital stuff at the speed of light. We've got cloud computing, so we can store it all for near zero cost. Computers allow us to make 1 million or 1 billion copies of it for near zero cost, and we can, we can share, we can keep our ownership, our intellectual property, and share it under CC licenses, so you don't even have to give up your ownership of the content to share it with everybody on the planet. And so, you put all that together, and then you look at national goals about, I mean, look at what President Obama tonight in his State of the Union speech for the United States is going to talk about his want to have free college tuition for anybody that wants to go to community college in the United States. Why? Why is that in the State of the Union? Well, because he gets it, right? He understands that you've got to have an education if you're going to get ahead, and it's a not only is it a I think the right thing to do for individual human beings to give people an opportunity at an education, but it's also a national competitiveness issue. If the United States falls behind other countries in terms of the education level of its population, we are in real trouble in the long term. So it's a long-term strategic goal as well. So that's all context to get back to your question about how do we protect our intellectual property work. So I always say start with your goal. So, if you and I were sitting down and we're at your university and, there were some folks around the table that really felt strongly about protecting, I would say, what are we trying to accomplish with education? Why do you do academic research at your institution? Why are you writing in journals? Is it to get tenure? Is that the end state that you're shooting for? Is it to protect your job? Is it to get wealthy? Is it prestige? Maybe those things are important, but is it primarily to help as many people as possible get access to high quality and education resources? I would argue that most educators got into it for the latter and not the former. Do you want to talk about protecting and securing and locking down, or do you want to talk about building, sharing, improving educational resources with a broader community? Or more likely, it's some mix of the two. It's not an either-or proposition. Yes, people need jobs. Yes, they need tenure, etc. But that doesn't mean that that there's not an opportunity to take the textbook costs in your course to zero so that more students can afford to go to college. It's certainly, there's nothing that conflicts with promotion and tenure and me sharing my course under a Creative Commons license and having other people around the world find errors in it and improve it and make it better. There's nothing that conflicts with my prestige in my discipline and my students co-creating and improving on the knowledge of my course because my entire course has an open license on it. So I think these things are not, they're not problematic. They can sit together very nicely. The only reason we're really having this conversation, frankly, is that this set of tools, the internet, CC licensing, things being digital, cloud computing, even though, yes, all that stuff's 10 years old, it's only 10 years old. And education moves very slowly, and 10 years, frankly, isn't very much time. And so I would argue that while education has made great progress in terms of digitizing, having online opportunities for learners, thinking about non-traditional learning in new ways, we still have a long way to go. And frankly, most educators, about 75% of them in the US, based on a recent survey, have never heard of OER. And many of them have never heard of open access publishing. And so a lot of it is not that there's naysayers out there or that people are against open. They just don't know. They've never had, they've never had this conversation that we're having right now, which is why I spend a lot of my time going to universities and giving keynote talks and then sitting down with the faculty senate and the librarians and the president and the board and the provost's office and the promotion and tenure committees, et cetera, to kind of walk them through this and say, look, you've got the right goals in your mission and vision, but let's look at the new set of tools that you can leverage and your faculty and your students can leverage to really reduce costs of education, increase access, improve prestige of the university and your faculty. So there's all sorts of great things we can do. So, just to sum it up here, copyright law protects your work, and you've got that kind of protection. If you don't want other people to use it, don't share it. Don't put it online. And some people just don't want to share, and that's okay. Nobody should be forced to share if they don't want to. I would say there's a caveat to that, though, and that is that if somebody's taking a federal grant from, say, a federal agency, that I believe that governments should require sharing. So, for example, one of the big projects we work on is a $2 billion Department of Labor grant called the TACT grant, where the U.S. Department of Labor put out $2 billion to U.S. community colleges and universities and their business partners and said, here's $2 billion, go build new academic programs that can be completed in 2 years or less. They can be degree programs, they can be certificates, but the goal of these is to put Americans back to work, to retrain them where there are jobs now and where there will be in the near future. So all these programs are where there are jobs: green technology, advanced manufacturing, all of the big gas and oil boom in the upper Midwest, nursing, healthcare, allied health, right? Baby boomers are retiring. And the federal government in this case said, if you take this money, you will put a Creative Commons attribution license on everything you build. If you don't agree to those terms, then you can't have the money. And that's called open policy. And we advocate strongly for that, both for governments around the world and for foundations, to require that the default on the products that are produced with their money is open and not closed. Because if you said you're in the Northeast, I'm in the Northwest, we all pay federal taxes. If the Northeast, so the Northeast United States right now is building a new national STEM curriculum, but the Northwest United States and Arizona and Louisiana and everybody else, we help pay for that new national STEM curriculum that's being built in the Northeast corridor of the U.S. Under this new open policy, the Department of Labor said to the Northeast states, look, it's really great you're building a new national STEM curriculum, and here's $20 million to go build that. But because this is federal public money, this is taxpayer money, the taxpayers, which includes all the United States, should get uninhibited, free, open access to it. So everything will have a CC BY or a Creative Commons attribution license on it. And we feel strongly about that. We think that's the right thing to do.
I agree with you. I think it's it provides opportunities for others to learn, others to build off ideas. I agree with your points earlier about what is our ultimate rationale for teaching and learning. What's the point of education? And I would add to it. I agree 100% that we have. I heard this morning that the iPhone is now 8 years old. And we've really only been using seriously the internet for about 10 years. I think a lot of us still don't understand it, and we don't know what OER is, and we don't sit in on these chats or read handbooks and read the chapters. And I think one of the challenges I also see is that especially in K-12, sometimes higher ed, but in K-12 I have a lot of teachers that I will say blog about or share your work. And there's this feeling, why would I share my work? Like, what value do my ideas have? And like, well, somebody else might be trying to think through your thoughts. This is one of the things you said to loop back around to. This is an addition, an added question. But from what you see at Creative Commons, and some of your experiences, one of the questions that you asked earlier is, why share? Why, especially in K-12, why share? And then also, one thing that's interesting to me is why should, in K-12 or in higher ed, but especially K-12, why should teachers use shared materials? Why share, but then also why should our teachers be using stuff that other people share online?
Yeah, so let's dive into that. So first, I think you brought up a good point. There is a risk of not sharing. So a lot of educators think, yeah, the internet, that's for Facebook or, other things that really don't have any educational impacts, and and I don't need to share. In fact, sharing is likely detrimental to my career, or some go even further. And I would argue quite strongly that the risk of not sharing, if you're an educator, is obscurity. And the greatest risk of any educator in this network digital age that we have and will always have into the future is that if you aren't sharing, you aren't known. And if you're not known, you risk being obscure. And obscurity is close to not being useful, to be completely blunt about it. So it's easier to make that, or simpler to understand from a research perspective. So if you are a researcher, but you never publish, then nobody knows what your research is, and frankly, your research doesn't matter. If you're a researcher and you publish in traditional, for-profit, very expensive subscription-based journals, the new data is that fewer than 3 people on the planet have read your article, and that's not very many. And so I got this, $6 million grant to study prostate cancer, and I've done all this great research, and 3 people read it. Is that the impact that I want to have? Not really. We know that with open access journals, the articles on average are read 15 times more than in closed journals. Why is that? Is it because they're better journals? No, they also have a peer review process, and the rigor is there, and your colleagues, your peers around the world in your discipline are reviewing and deciding whether or not your research is good enough to be published. The difference is that they are open access, meaning anybody on the planet can read that research. So, if you spent 2 years of your life working on that cancer research, do you want people to read it? Well, of course you do. Not only do you want to be read, because it just makes you feel better that people know what you're working on and they know your name. Even more important, I'm trying to cure cancer. And if 45 people read my article, the odds that somebody else out there has a good idea, or might share their research methodology with me, or might, I've seen something that I've missed, 45 is a lot better than 3. And so, if what we're, if you take education to even a broader scale, what's education really about? I would argue education's, primarily about not the individual, but it's society understanding that we've got challenges and always will that need to be solved, and we need as many minds as possible on the problem. So we've got, folks, we got real problems with global warming. We're going to have increased water scarcity, even though oil prices have dropped because the Saudis are trying to, flush out the new techniques in the United States with a price war. Make no mistake, we have limited reserves of oil on this planet. We've got increased. Look no further than what's been happening in Paris. We've got severe strife within society among people that have different narratives about what society should look like, and they're not talking to each other very well right now. And we've got protests in no fewer than 11 countries, burning French flags. That's not good. And so without educated people that can put their minds on these problems, we're less likely to solve them as quickly. So, a friend of mine likes to say, if it's true that less than 5% of the world's population have access to higher education, which is true, by the way, if you were a betting person, where would you bet that the cure for this prostate cancer is going to come from? Are you going to bet on the 5%, or are you going to bet on the 95% that have access to all the cancer journals? Right? I'm going to go with 95% every time. Now, I still want the 5% working on it, but if everybody has access, it's a different story. So that, I think that's the risk of not sharing. Let's talk about the reason to share. One of the reasons to share, as I've mentioned before, is it's so easy and cheap to share. So I can share, everything that's on my computer, the last 20 years, all my research, my writings, my PowerPoint slides, anything I've ever done, I could literally share with Ian in about 5 minutes in a Dropbox file, and I could make that Dropbox download public, and I could share it with everybody on the planet. I mean, it's, and no exaggeration, it is that easy. And if I really wanted to scale that, I would put the files up in an Amazon, the Amazon S3 cloud, and it would probably cost me about $15-20 a month to share everything I've ever done with anybody in the world. So if we have those tools where we can share, make copies, and distribute at the marginal cost of zero, as educators, I argue, quite frankly, that we have the moral and ethical obligation to do so. It's like if you cared about hunger and you had in your back pocket a food machine, and the food machine could feed everybody on the planet for the marginal cost of zero, should you turn the food machine on, yes or no? Now, maybe if you're, I don't know, Monsanto or somebody, you might not want to turn on the food machine because you've got you have a business model around providing food, et cetera, et cetera. But if you could do it, would you turn the food machine on? Well, of course you would. You're going to let people starve? And that's a bit where we are with education. We literally have this, learning copying machine where we can share at the marginal cost of zero with everybody on the planet. And the question for each individual educator is, are you going to turn on that machine to share? So that's one thing, is I think when you've got the tools and they're that simple to use, that we should. Now let's talk about the real reasons to share. I think it comes down to four things: efficiency, access, impact, and scalability. So efficiency is, today in education we spend, so let's focus just on the United States for a minute. In higher ed alone, it hovers, but it's somewhere between $8 and $9 billion a year are spent in the United States by students in higher education on textbooks. That's a lot of money. $8 to $9 billion. In K-12, it's around $6 to $8 billion a year. And so there's an efficiency argument. Should we be spending $8 billion a year in K-12 for textbooks? When we buy them, we keep them for a decade. They're on average 10 years old. They're only paper. I mean, we get a really lousy product for $8 billion a year. That's no good. That's not efficient. We're fundamentally not taking advantage of things being digital, cloud computing, CC licensing, etc. Same thing in higher ed. Another one is, well, before we leave efficiency, a lot of faculty are sensitive to this argument, but I think it needs to be said, and that is that a lot of faculty teach Stats 101. A lot of faculty teach Introduction to Algebra. A lot of faculty teach Calculus. A lot of faculty teach Intro to Biology. And not to say that we should have one mandated curriculum. We absolutely should not have that. Academic freedom is there for a very good reason. But we are not having a conversation among all of the chemistry professors in the world to say, hey, we all have Intro to Chem series in every community college, in every technical college, in every university on the planet. How do we share better? So that I can see your syllabi, I can see your courses, you can see mine, and then there's an easy opportunity for faculty to contribute to the commons and to take from the commons. We're not having that conversation. As a result, there's, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would guess tens of thousands of faculty prepping for tomorrow's Intro to Spanish class, and nobody's talking to each other. And that's a tremendous lack of opportunity. We're missing an opportunity to improve that content, to share with each other. Access is a key reason to share. We got a lot of people around the world that cannot afford to go to college, and given that textbooks in community colleges in the U.S. can approach 50% of the cost of going to college, in universities, textbooks usually approach 25% of the total cost of attending college. That's a problem. And we very quickly could take the highest enrolled 150 textbooks and make them free. We could have open textbooks with CC licenses on the top 150 courses, and then if Ian's university looked at that, those 3 different open calculus textbooks that were created and said, yeah, I don't really like any of the 3, but boy, I really like chapters 2, 7, and 8 out of this one, and I like chapter 1 and 6 out of this one, and Ian's a master in calculus. He's going to write these new chapters and then, create a new remix. My hunch is that the really smart faculty at the world's universities could remix and come up with something that would work for their students. Another one is impact. So, impact is all about how do you have the biggest effect, positive effect, for the resources that you're putting against a goal or a strategy or a problem. And if we want to have the biggest impact for the investments that we're making, open is the way to go. Right? If you want to get people to think in new ways about how to cure prostate cancer, the best way to do it is to publish your research in an open access journal so that everybody on the planet can read it. If you're Ian and you want to share a new idea about open pedagogy because Ian's using OER in his classroom and he says, my students really get they get really excited about learning when they're able to create and participate in authentic learning tasks. And so I'm going to change from giving them assignments, grading their assignments, and then I throw it away and they throw it away. The new thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, here's this course and this textbook that we've got for Intro to Psychology, and your assignment is actually to improve the course and the textbook, and you're going to be cited, and the new work is going to be under an open license. And not only are all your colleagues going to see it, but the cohort of students coming in behind you at this university will use the revised version of the course that you're building. And I, as your faculty member, I'm going to put this up in OER Commons and on Connections and Merlot, and I'm going to share this course with the world so that other professors who are teaching Intro to Psych can also use it, and other students. And so I'm setting the bar very high for you, and I need you to, really work hard, and hey, no plagiarism, and got to be citing original sources, etc. But your work matters. It's not going to be thrown away. Yes, you get a grade, but everybody's got an A now. Let's go do good work and important work that matters. And the last point, I guess, would be scalability, and that is that in education, we oftentimes think about what's commonly referred to as the iron triangle, right? So the iron triangle is cost, quality, and access. And it's called the iron triangle because if you want either of those three things to go up, one of the other items has to go down. So if you want better quality, then access has to go down because you have to serve fewer people if it's going to cost the same. If you want higher quality and you want the same access, then costs go up because it's going to take more money. If you want access to go up, then quality is going to go down because we've got to put people in bigger classes. So these are the trade-offs that we've traditionally thought about, and with open, it doesn't have to be that way. So I oftentimes give talks called "Breaking the Iron Triangle." Right? We truly can sink, yes, significant resources. Let's go spend $2 million building out, a really top-of-the-line, state-of-the-art Intro to Chemistry series with all the textbooks, multiple versions of each textbook, curriculums, designed state-of-the-art. Let's get games and learning, woven into it. Let's have Sims on everything. Let's have data analytics across everything, customized learning pathways, dashboards for faculty that say how they're doing, dashboards for the students. They can see where they are, different routes for different people based on how fast they want to move. For $2 million, I can give you all of that for Intro to Chemistry. But to scale it, all you have to do is slap an open license on the content and slap a free open software license on the software, and now you paid for it once, and everybody on the planet can use it. And if you don't want to use it, that's okay, right? You should never be forced to use anything as an academic, but at least the resource is there and it's available. We still think too much in terms of, every student in my class has to buy that resource. And even worse, so all your students, any faculty who are watching this, I'm sure you've heard your students gripe about A, the high cost of textbooks and other resources in your class, and B, after your class is over, they go back to the bookstore, and if the bookstore will buy it back at all, which sometimes they won't because the publishers have turned the versions and they can't sell it back, but even if they can sell it back, they get like 10 or 15 cents on the dollar usually, and the students are really angry about that. Well, it's about to get worse. So the publishers now, their new model is to not sell you paper copies of the books, but rather lease you digital copies of the textbook. And so while that might sound good on the surface, because yes, you get digital, and that's good if you've got a digital device, what's not good about it is that it's got technical protection measures or digital rights management software on it, so only the student who licensed the work can see the work legally. We understand that. You get a license, you get access to it. The big problem, though, is that at the end of the semester, at the end of the quarter, when the student stops paying for that fee, poof, the access goes away. So the publishers have created this new revenue model, this new market space, where they've introduced essentially artificial scarcity into a world that's full of digital abundance. So we know that we can build digital things. Everybody can keep them forever. We can make copies for near zero cost. We can store them for almost zero, and everybody can have a copy of the textbook. Everybody can have a copy of the game. Everybody can have a copy of everything we build if it's got an open license on it. The new model from commercial publishers will be moving toward a model where everybody is a first sale. There is no more used textbook market. That'll be gone because they don't make any money in that space, and they're moving you toward a subscription-based model. You've seen Xbox go this way with games. You don't get to buy games anymore for your Xbox, right? You lease games on a subscription-based model. Netflix model's the same, right? It's like a newspaper model. So, so it's just something we need to think about. This goes back to kind of the core questions we need to ask as educators. Should we as educators, as researchers, should we turn over our copyright to for-profit journals that then charge us to buy back our research so that we can use it with our students and with our universities? Is that an okay model? More and more faculty are saying, no, that's not okay. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to publish openly. Is it okay that your students take Intro to Algebra, they do well, and they're going to go on to calculus, but they can't go back and they can't go back and look at their algebra textbook because it's gone, because they stopped paying their $20 a month and they don't have access anymore? And educators are saying, no, it's not okay. We have digital things we can put an open license on, and they can keep it forever. I mean, part of becoming an educated person is building a library of knowledge over a period of time so that you can share and reference those resources. If we move to a world where business models are pushing us to lose access based on a subscription-based model when it comes to educational resources, that's on us. That's our fault, because every single discipline in education, we could come together as physicists, as chemists, as psychologists, and we could say, not in our field. In our field, we will produce the textbooks. They will be free and open to our students. In our field, the courses will be free and open for our students forever. In our field, students will be co-constructors of knowledge, and we will help to introduce them into the disciplines within which they will become productive members of society. So we're at this pivotal point right now in education where we get to make those decisions. But there are decisions to make. If we don't make them, others in the marketplace will make them for us, and we'll lose the capability to play.
Yeah, I think that's it's an important piece, that there's decisions that need to be made, and we have to do it now. It's it's funny that you brought it up, but I teach ed psychology. I teach it twice a year. This is going on 4 years, so I've taught the class a lot. We have an ed psych book that's pretty pricey. When I first started 4 years ago, it was $130, $150, $175, and I would not send my students to the bookstore. I say go to Amazon and buy it, get it used, rent it. But even then, it was pretty cost prohibitive. I ultimately said, okay, we gain nothing if you write me a paper. You email it to me. It collects dust on my hard drive. From now on, we're going to use Wikispaces. I'm going to build a class wiki. Every year, I'm going to fold in the new students to the wiki, and the old ones I kick out, but the wiki is still there. It's still public, and all of your work is going to go on the wiki. Anybody can read it. It's all Creative Commons licensed. And so I went to my faculty, and I said, look, we all teach ed psych. We all have the kids buy this book. It's a really expensive book. It is a pinch in the pocketbook, and we could do better. And so I said, what we're going to start to do is, we're almost at the point where, not that much. I know a lot of my colleagues will probably have a heart attack. Not that much is changing about social constructivism right now, or constructivism, or behaviorism. So what I had students start doing is writing we're building up our own wiki of all of the content that's in the book. They would go research it, cite it. So I'm teaching them how to research. I'm teaching them how to cite. At the same time, I had, last summer the publisher's rep came and said, hey, the book that you always buy, it's exactly as you said. Well, we don't have this version anymore. We have version 8, and now it's a digital version, and it's this much money. And I said, well, that's interesting. Do you have like extra supplemental materials and content? No, not really. It's just the digital version. And they said, well, students can pay extra to print out the hard copy for those that don't want to read the digital. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. So can they sell the used version? No. They have, once they buy it, it's theirs. They can't turn it over. So all of us here, are, my faculty, my colleagues, were all like, no, we're not going that direction anymore. We keep getting the emails. It's like, no, we're hurting our students. So to wrap up, in K-12 and higher ed, how do we get started with Creative Commons licensing? How should I be using it? How should it affect my classroom and my students? How should it affect students in classrooms? In K-12, how do we use Creative Commons and the licenses that we can put on our work?
Yeah, so I guess to sum it up in two big ways. You want to think about what might you as an educator contribute to the Commons. And when I say the Commons, I mean this big space where not only educators are sharing, but photographers, artists, videographers, sculptors, people working on government data. There's this general idea that because we can share easily, that a lot of people want to, and we call it generally the Commons, which is why we're called Creative Commons. So one thing is, as educators, I always say, what can you give and what can you take? And it's okay to just give, and it's also okay to just take, but I always encourage folks to do both. Obviously, no money is changing hands in any of this. Creative Commons licenses are free. They don't cost anything to use. It doesn't cost you anything to download somebody else's open textbook and use it. And it also doesn't cost you anything to share your work. So it's a question of, where's your comfort level and what is your need and what, sort of problem are you trying to solve? So I always thought that it would be easier for new kind of entrants to open to take first and share later. But it's really interesting. In education, we actually see the opposite. We actually see people more willing to share first and take other people's work later. And as I've talked with educators over time, that's mostly about I'm really comfortable with my work, and I think my work's really good, and I can see that others might value and benefit from using my work. It's not pride, but well, maybe it is. I'm proud of my work, and I think that it might do you some good, and here it is. Right? I'm happy to share. And so if that's where people want to start, I'd say great. The most important thing first is to find out who owns it. So a lot of educators just shooting from the hip will say, well, of course I own everything I build. You always need to look at your local contract, because that might not be the case. Sometimes the university or the school district in K-12 owns everything that you build on the clock. Sometimes you own everything you build in the course of your employment, and sometimes it's split ownership, where the university or the K-12 district has non-exclusive copyright, and you, the educator, also have non-exclusive copyright, meaning both parties hold copyright. The reason that's important is it's only the copyright holder that can put an open license on a work, which kind of makes sense, right? If Ian has a textbook, Cable Green can't swoop in and say, hey, I'd like to put a Creative Commons license on Ian's textbook. It's not mine to give. That's not my choice. That's Ian's choice. And so the same thing's true of the work that you're producing. You need to find out who owns it. So whenever I come to a university or to a school district, the very first thing we do is I say, can I see a copy of your employment contract? And we look through it, and we just find out who owns it. So if you're going to share, make sure you own it before you share. Then all you have to do is go to creativecommons.org and just click on the big green button in the middle of the screen that says Get a License, and that will take you to our license chooser. You can choose which license you want. It gives you a little bit of code. You stick it on your digital thing, and you're done. So it's real simple. It's free. We can go into details maybe in another session or another time about why you want to use our license chooser, but in a nutshell, you're putting an open license on your work, and you're signaling to everybody in the world, hey, here's my work. It's my intellectual property. I own it. I have the copyright. And I'm willing to give some freedoms and some permissions to you so that you may also use it, and I hope it's useful for whatever you want to use it for. So giving is great. And the other part of giving is you want to make sure that when you give, you don't just put an open license on it, but you put it somewhere where people can find it. So you want to get it out on your website, or get it out in an open repository, or take it to your academic national or international conference and run a session and say, hey, I think we education psychologists should be talking more about sharing educational content, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and here's my course, and I've put it up in I put it up in Connections, and here it is, and I think that, and I created a new space in Connections in their repository for educational psychologists, and I hope that you'll join me and put your courses up here too. You also want to share in editable formats. So if Ian put his open textbook up in a locked down PDF format and put a CC license on it, that's great. I can use it for free, and it's really nice that he put a Creative Commons license on it, so now I can legally use it. But it's not very helpful for me because I can't edit it. And as an educator, I want to move chapters around probably, or maybe I don't like the way Ian did Chapter 2 and I want to contribute my own Chapter 2. And so if Ian shares, say, a Word document or a rich text file or HTML file or something that I can edit, that's going to be better. So when you share open, share out in a repository somewhere where people can find it, and share editable files. Then there's the take and use, right? So what can you take from the Commons? And frankly, that's the biggest challenge in open education, is getting people to use stuff. For a decade, MIT and hundreds of other universities around the world have just shared. They've opened up all their courses and put them online. If you want to see this, go to the Open Education Consortium, and you'll see all the universities around the planet. They're sharing their courses. So sharing is important, and we should continue to share. But the biggest hurdle we have is on the demand side, on the consumption, on the adoption of other people's works. And I chalk that up to really two things. One is lack of awareness. As we said before, very few faculty kind of thought about OER or ever engaged in it. And the other one is that, to be blunt, there's still a lot of not invented here attitude out there. So if I didn't build it, it's not good. Or it's not as good as what my publisher has given me for 20 years. That I trust them and I trust me, but I don't really trust anybody else. And so I used to work in the community colleges in Washington State, and our mantra was, we have to move from not invented here to proudly borrowed from there. And proudly borrowed from there means, as an educator in the 21st century in this digital networked world, my job is not to build everything, because I can't be the best at everything. That's silly and arrogant and impossible. My job is to find the best, smartest people, the best content, the best data, the most current articles, the best white papers, whatever it might be, the best research, and bring it into my class, synthesize it, massage it, remix it, understanding the business environment that my students are going into for jobs, understanding the particular needs of my students, understanding the mission of my university or college or K-12 institution, and to modify to make it fit me, right? That's my role as an educator. And the best educators, and they always have been, frankly, the best teachers and professors, are professors that do that. It's just that doing that in a digital networked world, there's so many more options than we ever had 15, 20, or further years ago, because now things are digital, they're on the internet, they're easy to get, and they've got, more often than not, Creative Commons licenses on them. We're closing in on 1 billion Creative Commons licensed works in the Commons, and that's a conservative estimate. So there's a lot of stuff out there that you can legally use. I always say start small, right? Start with a Khan Academy video. Start with a PhET simulation from the University of Colorado Boulder. Start with a chapter from an open textbook, and then go in a little deeper. See if you can go with an open textbook. Your students will wave their pom-poms and be so happy that they don't have a $200 textbook in your class. Go down the hallway and say to your faculty chair, hey, can we at the next faculty meeting have a discussion where I think we can get our 5 highest enrolled courses to textbook 0. Can we eliminate textbook costs for our 5 highest enrolled courses in the psychology department? Well, of course you can, right? It's just a matter of doing it and making that decision. Can we in our psych department have a space where we share course content with each other. Maybe we just share it with each other at first. We don't share with the world. And then maybe we expand it out and we share with the university, but not everybody else. And then maybe once we develop a level of comfort, we'll put Creative Commons licenses on them and just stick them out in open repositories. And then, hey, let's go. Let's have international conversations about this stuff. So those are my recommendations.
I like the ideas about, you know, sharing, and it's interesting to me that a lot of people start with the sharing and not really the using. And I love the idea of you know, taking multiple resources and sort of remixing them into the text that you like. You know, I definitely try and you know, I apologize to students if I start a class and I say, you know, that they have to buy a textbook. You know, I try and build a program that has 0 textbooks. Never mind all that. I wanted to thank you for the time. I knew it was going to be an awesome amount of time to sit here and talk about some of these very important issues. Any last words?
Last words. There's so much to talk about.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
I guess, you know, it's one of those think globally, act locally things. The change is going to come from each and every one of you. If you can give a little bit of your expertise to the Commons, put a Creative Commons license on it, that's great. If you can take a little, use somebody else's work, you're going to make the person who shared very happy, and you're going to make your students very happy. Please do that. If you ever want, you know, me to come to your campus or K-12 district, I'm on the airplane a lot, and I'm more than happy to do so. Let me just share my email with everybody. I'm Cable, C-A-B-L-E, at creativecommons.org, or you can also reach me at cable.green@gmail.com. And if you're on Twitter, I'm at cgreen, C-G-R-E-E-N. That's where I kind of dump all the interesting new things that I'm seeing on a daily basis. And maybe that's enough for now, and I hope to meet you all soon. Anybody that's interested, and I'm happy to come to your institutions and talk more.
Very cool, and I'll share those email addresses, and I'll put all this into a blog post and share it out. Once again, this is an interview that's a partner with the other interviews, and then the column that we put out in the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy, the specific column we're talking about, teaching and learning, sharing openly online with our K-12 students and then beyond. So with that, Cable, thank you so very much for your time, and I encourage people that are watching this to reach out and share and investigate Creative Commons licensing and use content that people are sharing in the Commons, and let's find new opportunities for our students and ourselves to teach and learn using these digital tools. And so with that, we'll wrap up.